Hello, and welcome to the Nutrition is Medicine Plant-Based Diet series. I will turn on my camera so we can do some introductions. But my name is Stephanie. I am the campus dietitian here at William & Mary. I will let Nancy introduce herself.
I'm Nancy Moul. I'm a practitioner in student health.
And so through this series, we are really hoping to talk to you guys about everything that goes on with a plant-based diet. So why you may want to go plant-based, some warnings against going plant-based so that you can do it healthfully. And then over the next few series, we're going to talk about introducing foods that are plant-based and maybe some FAQs or fact and fiction that you may want to learn or that you should know about plant-based diets. So if you can, stay through all the next 2 weeks after this for the next couple of series. But if you're not able to stay for all three, they will be recorded. I am recording right now, and you will find those on the wellness website. So with that, let's get started. Let food be thy medicine is one of my favorite quotes. I remember the first time I read this, I myself was in college, and obviously I was in school for dietetics. So, my mission was always health and wellness, but this is such a true statement. You really want food to be your medicine, food to be your foundation within your diet. You don't want to have supplements and all these things filling up and clouding the basis of health. So always focusing on food first. And that's what we're really going to be focusing on throughout this entire series is food as your medicine. The plan for today is we are going to start with a presentation talking about the research behind a plant-based diet. We're going to transition to, we're going to do our food demo first and then end with some Q&A. So please add any questions you have into the chat box and we can answer them either on that slide if it's pertinent to that slide, or we'll save it to the very end. And we'll also give you the opportunity to unmute yourself as well and ask a question live if you feel comfortable. So why go plant-based is a question that a lot of people ask themselves. Why should I go plant-based? What is this important for me? And there are so many reasons why you may want to go plant-based. It could be compassion. It could be nonviolence, compassion for yourself, nonviolence for other people, caring for the planet, the environment. And one reason a lot of people go plant-based is for the animals, right? Saving their lives, saving the environmental impact, their footprint. There are so many reasons to go plant-based and not many reasons that are wrong, right? It improves your health when done well and balanced. There's a lot of positives to going plant-based.
So what are some of the ways to be plant-based? So we can look at a definition of terms, and you can think about where you fall or hope to fall on this continuum. First, defining flexitarian, whole food, plant-based approaches to diet and incorporating Meatless Monday, trying to be as healthful as possible, usually motivations behind that for just general wellness, and perhaps family members have had chronic diseases that would make one want to move in that direction. Second is pescatarian. These are folks that only eat seafood, so no red meat or chicken. The lacto-ovo vegetarians, lacto coming from milk, ovo from egg, and so they will eat dairy and eggs, but not red meat, chicken, or seafood. Lacto-vegetarian is, again, lacto from milk, so emphasis is on eating dairy products. And the ovo-vegetarian, the egg focus, eating eggs, avoiding red meats, chicken, dairy, and seafood. Defining vegan is not eating any animal products, so no meat, eggs, dairy, and that includes honey. So as we look at some statistics for vegetarianism in the United States, we see a percentage of the population that actually is vegetarian is only about 1 to 3% in the US. Those that describe themselves as vegetarian is more of the range of 3 to 6%. About 13% of US adults eat meat with less than half of their meals, and about 26% have reduced how much meat they consume in the last year. As we look at a pie chart, we can see some percentages projected for how often adults eat vegetarian meals, and we can see that 53% report less than 1 meal per week, and then it breaks down beyond that. Stephanie's already alluded to why people choose to be vegetarian. Some of the reasons why people may avoid it are at the top: taste, beliefs about getting enough nutrition, convenience, social barriers, and we're here to dispel some of those myths, and we'll bring that out in a future session. So the vegetarian movement is experiencing far greater success with adoptions than with adherence. So essentially, many people are trying it, but not that many are sticking to it. And so why are the numbers so much lower? Some difficulties, again, this was just mentioned: taste, convenience, social dynamics, and identity. If we look at a comparison between prevalence of people that identify as being former vegetarians, we see it's around 9 to 10%, and those that are current vegetarians down to 1 to 2%. So this is a list of various countries that report their percentages of their population being vegetarian, and so moving from the lower percentages to the country with the most, which is India. Actually, the US isn't on there because we fall lower than Australia. We're still in the 1 to 3%. Australia, Iceland, Brazil in the 5, 6, 8%. Brazil is the only South American nation on the list. In the UK, which is ranked as the 3rd highest in Europe for reporting vegetarianism, is twice as likely in the female gender versus male. So it's kind of an interesting breakdown. And then Germany and Austria and Italy, fall somewhere in a similar range for percentages. Some of those countries have taken on government support for various movements, and that's been helpful in raising awareness. Taiwan at 12%, Israel at 13%, and of course with the religious preferences of Judaism in that country, that certainly relates to restricting consumption of animals, and brings that number a little bit higher. And then in India, similarly, with the Buddhist faith and the emphasis on not harming animals, we see the percentages higher.
The Academy of Nutrition and Dietetics takes a very positive position for plant-based diets. And so if you're not familiar with the Academy of Nutrition and Dietetics, also known as AND, it is the governing body for dietitians. And so with this positive statement, it really shows that those plant-based diets, when done properly and balanced, are very healthful. They're full of nutrition, and they're perfectly adequate for all stages of the life cycle. And so I want to note here, especially things like pregnancy, lactation, infancy, childhood, areas within the life cycle where you need more nutrition, you need more energy, more nutrients to help either you grow a child, or you yourself as a child or an infant grow into a healthy adult. Following a plant-based diet is appropriate at those ages, but again, as long as it's done in a balanced, well-rounded way. Plant-based diets also reduce the risk of certain chronic conditions, which Nancy will go over in quite a lot of detail coming up, but things like heart disease, type 2 diabetes, hypertension, and certain types of cancer. And it also reduces your risk for obesity because it is mostly plants, which are very filling with their fiber and typically a little bit lower in calorie. There are certain nutrients, again, that you do need to focus on that plant-based diet. And as we go through this series, we will focus on those specific nutrients. The one that typically comes to mind is vitamin B12. And lastly, the Academy states that plant-based diets are environmentally sustainable. They do help the animals. They lower that footprint that the animals give off when they are being produced and raised and created for our consumption. So I really like this infographic because it really breaks down what goes into meat production. So you have to think about the water, the land, the grains, that go into making beef or chicken or whatever it may be, but we'll use beef just to be consistent. And not only what goes into that beef, but what are those cattle living on? They're living on farmland, which typically has to be deforested, and trees have to be removed for them to thrive in that area. And as a dietitian, I talk about what goes in, and I also talk about what goes out of humans and animals. And so fecal matter, manure, that has to go somewhere out of these animals. And typically it's released into waterways. Their gas is released into the air as methane. So these are things you want to think about when you may be eating meat as a way or a motivation to maybe switch to a plant-based once a day, once a week, once a month, whatever it may be. So just to give you an example of what goes into to making a quarter pounder hamburger, about 6.7 pounds of grain and forage. So that's if they're allowed to forage. So we'll say 6.7 pounds of feed, 52.8 gallons of water, nearly 75 square feet of land, and about 1,000 BTU, for feed production that has to be transported. So it's a lot of fossil fuel that has to be used to create that quarter pound of beef. The same thing when you think about milk, right? Milk also requires a good deal of resources that go into it. It's not just produced naturally. Getting outside of the cow, just thinking about the water that goes into that cow to help them produce milk. Even within the plant-based milk, there are some that use more water, some that need a little bit more land. So when you're choosing your plant-based milks, think about the impact. And typically what I recommend is variety, right? So if you're switching between rice milk and soy milk, oat milk and almond milk, you're overall reducing your environmental impact compared to dairy milk.
So on to the health benefits, which there are many, and I'll talk about them separately, but inflammation control, weight management, reduction of cardiovascular risk, improvement in diabetes symptoms and possible reversal of disease, and sports performance improvement. What is inflammation? So this is a physical condition in which part of the body becomes red and swollen, hot, painful, and is a reaction to injury or infection. It is our body's first line defense and the first step in healing that our immune system carries out, and also ties in with our nervous system. We consider inflammation good when it is able to respond and do its part in healing an infection, but we consider it bad when inflammation becomes chronic, such as in the case of obesity and chronic illnesses. It becomes a burden to the body and has been linked to a variety of diseases, which are shown at the bottom in the diagram: cardiovascular, Alzheimer's, pulmonary diseases, arthritis, neurological diseases, diabetes, cancer, and then also autoimmune diseases such as lupus. So what really helps? We know that lifestyle changes are huge in making a difference, and those include not only plant-based nutrition, but exercise, self-care practices such as meditation, yoga, ways to manage stress, quitting smoking, taking care of just our mental health. And there is a famous cardiologist, his name is Dean Ornish, who wrote a book called Undo It. And I would recommend it. It's listed in your references, but he did a lot of research on this whole idea of lifestyle change, and was able to really demonstrate through his research that life expectancy can increase in the range of 12 to 14 years by just following these trends of lifestyle change and beginning them earlier in life. So as we look at our family members and we see what family history may be there for chronic disease, that gives us great motivation, as just in addition to just wanting to be healthy. So there are some markers of inflammation that can be actually measured in the blood, and they're abbreviated there. They don't specifically tell us where the targeted inflammation always is, but in many cases it lies in the intimal lining of the arteries where the epithelial cells are, and that's where plaque forms and creates narrowing of vessels, which leads to coronary artery disease and ultimately heart attack and stroke. So moving on. So how do we control inflammation? Well, we do it through plant-based nutrition, and as a result, we have improved joint swelling and less pain of arthritis and some of those inflammatory conditions and autoimmune diseases. We can decrease the severity and frequency of migraines through an anti-inflammatory diet. We see improved recovery from exercise, which Stephanie will address shortly. A reduction in risk of preventable chronic diseases, such as coronary artery disease and diabetes, and the promotion of a healthy gut biome. So I'd like to just digress for a minute and talk about the biome. This is the beneficial bacteria in the gastrointestinal tract, and it's important in the regulation of our immune functions within the body, which can be compromised when we take certain medications such as antibiotics, and also with certain gastrointestinal conditions, it is compromised. When there is enough of the good bacteria being destroyed, it can lead to a condition which is sometimes referred to as leaky gut. And that results when whole food particles enter the blood. This leads to a compromised immunity. Sometimes we see allergic responses to food or just generalized inflammation throughout the body. So it's important that we recognize that our nutritional intake affects the microbes, which help us to digest food. They also produce anti-inflammatory fatty acids. They provide fuel for the gut bacteria cells, and they collaborate with the immune system to control unhealthy bacteria, or what we refer to as pathogens that cause infection and disease. So it is necessary to feed our microbes in the gut with antioxidants and prebiotics, and those are found in plant-based foods such as citrus fruits, legumes, apples, soy, tea, wine, and fermented foods, which are part of the prebiotic component to this whole biome discussion. And examples of that are kimchi and kefir. So very important to have a healthy gut biome in this whole anti-inflammatory focus. All right, assisting with weight management. Although weight loss is not the total goal of switching to a plant-based diet, it can happen as a secondary sort of natural result. Although there are some individuals that practice plant-based nutrition that may have trouble keeping weight on, and we sometimes forget about that. So it all really relates to the fat that is in the diet. If we look at the nutrients at the bottom, we see that 9 calories per gram exist with the nutrient fat. And as we look at the diagram of the stomach, with 400 calories of oil in it, 400 calories of chicken, which by the way is about 23% fat. So chicken is not a low-fat food. And versus 400 calories of vegetables, look at the difference in the volume and how quickly that same amount fills up the space. So the increased fiber and roughage that we see on the far right with plant-based foods are helping to decrease appetite so that we're not as likely to eat as much volume or feel the need to take in as much volume of food. And that's how it relates to weight management, in addition to looking at the fat specifically. So all fats have 9 calories per gram, whether it's a healthy fat or not a healthy fat. And although we say healthy fats are okay, such as avocado and olive oil and certain nuts, we do want to limit the intake, mainly because of the calorie connection. And as we're looking at nutrition labels, we can try to, if we're comparing brands of a particular food, different cheeses, whatever, although we wouldn't be taking in cheese if we were truly vegan, we want to focus on the number of grams of fat and look for a 2 to 3 gram per serving size amount, and try to get to 20 to 30 grams of fat total in a day for consumption of fat. So those are just a few guidelines to keep in mind. High fiber and low calorie are also important correlations with the assisting in weight management. So lower cardiovascular risk comes from the reduced intake of dietary cholesterol and saturated fats, and that's because we're minimizing dairy, meat, and eggs, which do stimulate the body to make cholesterol. Blood pressure is also reduced through plant-based nutrition, which impacts the blood vessels, the resistance in the vessels, the kidney function, and also the brain. Our blood is less thick and therefore, moves more easily through our blood vessels. And the sodium is reduced, so we have less water weight retention, and overall weight loss also happens with that. Another big part of this is fiber and the correlation with lowering cholesterol, particularly soluble fiber, which is found in oatmeal, for example. And what happens here, and as you see in the diagram, is that the soluble fiber and cholesterol from foods reach the stomach and travel to the small intestine, and then cholesterol gets packaged by the liver and reaches the small intestine, and then our soluble fiber forms a gel which actually binds to the cholesterol and helps to reduce the buildup in the bloodstream and takes it out of the body through the liver. So there are the benefits of increasing fiber in general, but soluble fiber in particular, because of that ability to create the gel and the binding capacity. So our blood lipids will also change as a result of plant-based eating. Cholesterol does not dissolve in blood, so it needs proteins to carry it where it needs to go. And there are 2 different types of cholesterol, just keeping this very basic. The LDL, the lower density lipoprotein, which is the bad cholesterol, and then the HDL, which is the good cholesterol. The LDL collects in the walls of the arteries and transports cholesterol from the liver to the tissues. So that's why it's going to be building up in the blood, and we're wanting to keep that number as low as possible. And that is achieved through plant-based nutrition. The HDL, which includes or is actually impacted by fruits and vegetables and adding olive oil and beans and legumes and all the things that are listed there in plant-based nutrition. And also exercise plays a large role in increasing the HDL. So knowing those numbers can be very helpful in just monitoring how we're receiving the cardiovascular benefits. And the other is lowering our triglyceride level, which comes from sugar intake and alcohol primarily, and we get great benefits in reducing it through plant-based nutrition. So the diabetes picture is fascinating. There are 2 different types of diabetes: type 1, where the pancreas is not able to make insulin, and type 2, where it is making insulin, but there's a problem with the increase in body fat preventing the insulin to actually be effective. And so there's an issue with resistance. And we do see that plant-based nutrition has a major impact on reducing the progression of early prediabetes, changes and rises in blood sugar, and prevents oftentimes the progression to actual type 1 diabetes. The statistic that's noted there, 30% of overweight men and women with prediabetes will develop type 2 diabetes within 5 years, is rather alarming. So if we identify this as a problem and we get on it with plant-based nutrition, we can really make an impact. But otherwise, we're heading down a road that's going to have many other challenges for impacts throughout the body. So the insulin is rather complex. After we eat, our blood sugar or glucose rises, which will trigger our pancreas to release insulin into the blood. And then the insulin travels through the blood to our cells and tells our cells to open up and let the glucose in. And once it's inside, the cell converts glucose into energy or stores it to be used later. So without insulin, glucose stays in our blood, and that's what we don't want. And then protecting our brain. I love the rule of 4 colors. That's always important to have as much color on your plate as possible, bright colors. But this, plant-based nutrition has great impact on brain function and health. The increase in antioxidants that come from these foods and the vitamins and the minerals help to lower amyloid deposits in the brain, which is the correlation with Alzheimer's risk. And we do know that Alzheimer's is a disease of the Western diet, and it is really a cardiovascular disease. So there's a lot that we can do through diet to reduce that. And then exercise and sleep also playing important roles in protecting the brain. And last, cancer risks will fall and survival will improve as a result of plant-based nutrition. Increasing fruits and vegetables and choosing complex carbohydrates are the goal. And as we know with meat, whether we're frying, broiling, grilling at high temperatures, there are chemicals that can be formed that might increase cancer risk, and particularly colon rectal cancer, prostate cancer, and breast cancer. And there's also an alteration in gut bacteria, which we just discussed how important that was for that to remain healthy. In terms of dairy, milk can have a particular protein which can stimulate cancer cell growth, and that is the correlation there with cancer risk.
Can I ask a question?
Absolutely.
Yes.
I have heard that because of that protein and dairy, that has the potential to increase inflammation, that's what makes it a not so good thing. Is that correct?
I believe that is the pathophysiology. Do you have a more direct answer for that,
Sure.
Stephanie?
Yeah. So there's research when it comes to dairy, and anytime it comes to research with dairy, you have to think about the power of the dairy industry over the government as well. So, but there are pros and cons of dairy, right? The pros, obviously, it's a great source of calcium, vitamin D. It's very easy to intake, but there are some cons, and that would be the inflammation risk as well as the hormones. When you think about what milk is, it is breast milk from a cow meant for a baby cow, right? When you think about female breast milk that we would feed infants, again, it's filled with nutrition and hormones that are meant to grow and develop. So you have to think about dairy milk as the same way. It does contain different nutrition as well as hormones that may be inflammatory within the human body.
Okay.
Does that answer your question? Okay.
It does. Thank you.
Good. Okay. So next we're going to talk about the impact on sports performance and exercise. And with Netflix releasing their big documentary on plant-based diets and exercise, I have worked with athletes across the country who have said, hey, I want to be plant-based, and I think it's great. We just need to have a plan, because anytime you go from eating meat to completely plant-based, there's always a few bumps in the road. So there are some great benefits to incorporating more plants as an athlete, or even someone who's active who exercises very regularly. The first is that it improves your glycogen stores. When you think about a plant-based diet, it's mostly carbohydrates, right? You do have some proteins in there, but it's a lot of carbohydrates. As an athlete, your muscles are constantly using carbohydrates. It's the main fuel source to your brain as well. So if you have energy-full muscles, if you've got a very focused and reactive brain, your performance will benefit a little bit there as well. So having more plants in your diet, it's always a benefit from the athlete perspective. Adequate protein sometimes is a challenge for athletes. When you think about a plant-based diet, Nancy covered this quite in depth, but there's a lot of fiber. There's a lot of roughage. There's a lot that goes with those proteins. So it's not as simple as eating chicken. It's quickly digested. You need more tofu. You need more beans. You need more tempeh on your plate to make up that same gram protein content. So where I would typically recommend a palm size piece of chicken for an omnivore athlete, for a plant-based athlete, we're going to look for a full cup, or if you're using your hand as a reference, about a palm and your fingers, so a full hand serving, so nearly twice the serving, just to make sure that we're giving your body all the protein that it needs. And the second thing we look at is that consistency of protein intake, so making sure that with every meal and snack, we're including some protein to give your body the optimum protein amount, so it's getting that small dose every day so you can optimize that protein breakdown and usage. Improved muscle recovery. Talked about this when it comes to controlling inflammation. So having more antioxidants on board, having some color on your plate is really going to be the key to help you recover from training. Lastly, you get more vitamins and minerals from a plant-based diet, yes, but you don't always get the right ones, right? So as an athlete, you're especially for distance runner, they call it foot strike anemia. So as you're running, your foot is striking the ground and breaking up some blood cells, breaking up some blood vessels, and you're losing iron within your blood. So you do have a higher iron need, as well as calcium for bones, B12 for your nerves, and vitamin D for muscle reflex and bone health. You have to think about that when you're planning a plant-based diet. Going right from omnivore to vegan, probably a little bit of a challenge, but by being strategic, being consistent with how you're fueling and working with a sports dietitian or just a dietitian in general, you will have a better chance at kind of checking off all of these nutrients and doing a really great job. And we'll talk about these in more depth in the coming up series. So we did have a question coming in. I'm going to answer now. So it says, do I need to eat rice with beans to make it a full protein? Is that brown or white rice? So yes and no. So research shows, in past history that yes, you should eat rice and beans to get that complete amino acid breakdown to make sure you're getting all those essential amino acids. The most recent research is showing that you don't necessarily have to have rice and beans in the same meal, just in the same day. Your body's able to store, you have an amino acid bank within your liver and throughout your body. So it's able to store and utilize and build proteins throughout the day. So you don't necessarily need to have them at the same exact time, but it's important to have them at some point during the same day. And that's where we get back to the concept of variety. If you're having a variety of plant-based proteins, odds are very good you're getting all of those essential amino acids to help your body run smoothly. When we think about plant-based athletes, a lot of us think about Tom Brady, who is no longer with the Patriots. He has moved on to warmer weather and secured himself another title. But there are a variety of plant-based athletes who are anywhere on the spectrum. So Tom Brady is a complete vegan. Other athletes dabble in the plant-based. So they might do it a couple times a week, maybe just around their training, maybe they're pescatarian, but they are using it to their advantage and really thinking about how they can build their performance based on how they're fueling. And I think one of the biggest thing that research is showing is their recovery is better. If you are recovering faster as a professional athlete, if you can be a couple seconds faster than your competition, that makes all the difference. And it's the same thing for an amateur athlete, collegiate athlete, or even just an everyday exerciser, right? If you're able to recover a little bit faster and you feel better the next day, you'll want to go back to the gym and you'll want to do more. If your muscles are sore and tired and you're kind of dragging, you're not going to feel as effective and you're not going to want to go back to the gym and you might lose some momentum. So thinking about it, not so much as a pro athlete perspective, but kind of as us as everyday Joe perspectives, there's a lot of benefits to going plant-based. There are a couple of drawbacks. So some of the drawbacks may include a reliance on packaged foods. And we were actually, Nancy and I were talking just before this session about one of my college roommates, and she was vegetarian, but she relied on pizza rolls and Oreos and those sorts of things to float her through the day. And that's not balanced. When we say plant-based, yes, Oreos are vegan. However, we want you to focus on whole foods wherever you can. We touched on the limited protein intake. So it does take a little bit more planning to get the amount of protein that you need. Not too much, it's not very difficult, but you do need to make sure that you're including some sort of plant-based protein at every meal. Then we want to look at nutrient deficiencies. So this is something where I always recommend getting lab work at least yearly. So we can take a look at your vitamin B12, your iron, your vitamin D. I know Nancy looks at lab work all day, every day, and she's the expert there. But you know, it's so important to have those health signs, and it is a drawback to the plant-based diet. Is, you know, you've got to be more strategic. You can't just eat the way you want to eat all the time, but there's a lot of benefits that come with it too. And then lastly, gastrointestinal symptoms. So this is one that I see with a lot of students struggling, especially with IBS, different gastroparesis, all of these different stomach and GI symptoms that they're experiencing. And one thing I ask them is, oh, what do you mostly eat? And they say, oh, I have oatmeal for breakfast and a big salad for lunch and mosaic bowl for dinner. And I'm like, what if we taper back the fiber just a little bit? And when you taper back that fiber, you give your gut a chance to relax and not have to work so hard to get that food broken down. And there are some times when a little bit lower fiber diet just momentarily can help you in the long run get back to that high fiber diet. So when you're thinking about going plant-based, you know, I always recommend transitioning slowly, because when you do introduce that big amount of fiber, you also need to introduce water for the risk of constipation. So there's a lot of things that you want to think about when going plant-based. So how can you go? What is a strategy when you're going plant-based? And so I always recommend transitioning slowly. So when I say plant-based, I mean, maybe you're having tofu scramble for breakfast, and maybe for lunch, you'll do a veggie burger or a regular burger with quinoa on the side and vegetables. And then dinner, you'll just have spaghetti and traditional meatballs, right? You're just choosing 1 or 2 meals per day or 1 or 2 meals per week that have some plants as the focal point of the plate. And then as you get more comfortable with that, you can transition to pescatarian or maybe full vegetarian, where plants are the majority of your meal. So yes, you may be having yogurt, but it's topped with berries and granola or oatmeal on the side. You're doing a roasted tofu stir fry for lunch, and then you're finishing with maybe a fish and brown rice dinner. And then lastly, you can transition to a full vegan diet. We've got lots of great options on campus, thinking about Mosaic Bowl, the Maize Station, different pop-ups we had at Sadler earlier this week. That was a beet rice bowl. There's lots of great options, whether you're on campus, off campus, cooking at home, you know, thinking outside the box and really pairing different stations together. There's a lot you can do to support a vegan diet.
So Stephanie has already touched some on the GI issues associated with the high fiber diet. You know, we want to add it slowly and increase the water are the main goals, and that's going to help to reduce the bloating, the gas. The changes that we'll see with the stool, constipation, fullness feelings, and cramping, discomfort. Again, adding the foods slowly. So we work with a lot of individuals in trying to control their symptoms, and you know, rinsing beans, not including the water into whatever you're making, can also be just a simple way to decrease the gas and bloating. And managing with food, cooking the legumes well, peeling the skin off the beans, such as with chickpeas, which is a little bit challenging, making sure that whole grains are cooked well, and with fruits and vegetables, increasing portions slowly, peeling skin, even though there's food value there. We also have to be careful about pesticides that are retained in certain skins of foods that are more porous, and that's also a concern for cancer risk.
All right, so before we get to questions, I saw a couple more came in, but we want to make sure we stay on time, so we'll definitely get to those at the end. We have a cooking demo, so I'm going to stop sharing my screen, and I'm going to turn you, we'll really carry you across the room, to Chef Stephen Moore, who is going to show you how to make a really quick and simple grain bowl in your room. You're live.
Hi, how's it going? My name is Steven. You can call me Chef Steven. You can call me Steven. It's all the same to me. Back when I was in college, the only thing we were allowed to have was a microwave and a coffee maker. I'm told it's pretty much the same way. So it's quite simple to cook a plant-based diet in your room and have it being whole foods, so to speak. So what we're going to do is we're going to cook some quinoa. We're going to cook some red lentils. The reason why I chose red lentils is red lentils cook quicker than like your green lentils, your black lentils, whatever. And they also cook down. They become almost like a dal, which is it's a Indian soup, so to speak. Next time you go visit your parents, steal this from their kitchen and bring it back with you, or you can go and buy your own. You're going to steal it. At least I would have stolen it. Because you're going to need it. You can actually cook out of this, or you're going to need it because you're going to be measuring your dry and your wet in it. I bought 2 soup mugs. I think they were called super mugs. It's the same thing. It has a lid on it. It's much easier. So we're going to start with measuring our dry ingredients first so they don't stick. Red lentils are actually this beautiful, like, orangish color when they start. So I've got about a half a cup here. Then I'm going to go back and do my quinoa also. Again, looking for a half a cup. This is more than one meal, so to speak. You could have this as a snack or have it as a meal or eat it the next day. So I got both my dry ingredients in here. The reason why I do that is because you put the water in here and then try to measure it, it's going to stick to the inside of everything. So I'm going to give everything over here. You can look at the wonderful background there. A quick rinse, just because in packaging, I'm just kind of cleaning them up a little bit.
So, Chef, do you recommend that they strain their grains, or can they do simply what you're doing and just rinse them off?
I'm rinsing them off and I'm straining them because I want the processing off of it, like the
dust.
Yeah, the dust, so to speak. For me. All right. So the fun part about both of these ingredients, they're almost equal parts by half a cup of water, half a cup of lentils. Half a cup of water, half a cup of quinoa. It's pretty forgiving. There's multiple methods where you can measure it with your finger, like you would rice. College shorn. And I haven't stolen a new, well, we're on plasticware right now, so I haven't stolen any of the flatware from the dining hall yet. Okay, so I have both my quinoa in this one, and my lentils in this one. You put the lid on it. The nice thing about these, I was being me. They have these nice little vents. You're gonna want to put the vent on it. So it gives the steam somewhere to escape. Also, the nice part about this is they can both cook at the same time. So we're not going to set for the full 10 minutes. I'm not, because I really don't think I can entertain you that much with me talking for 10 minutes. So as soon as I figure out where the clear is. So, like right now, I've sat it for 5 minutes. So, what I've got in here, you can just have beans and a grain, that works. But what we do at my house, because like half of our house is plant-based, I'm plant-based. My children are not, but that's fine with me. That's their choice, it's not mine. But a lot of times my wife and I will grab like slaw mix, because it's an easy, quick throw in just to pack some more vegetables in there. You know, I've got and pack some more flavor. So I've got, you know, shredded carrots, shredded cabbage, chives. I've got some broccoli. So when we hit around if we were cooking this for the full 10 minutes, at the 8-minute mark, I would stop and put a little bit of both of these in both bowls and close the lids. That would be, it would be steaming it with everything else. And you're also going to be adding some flavor because residual is going to fall out. Also, at that point, you can add whatever powdered flavorings you'd want, whether it be like a lemon pepper or a Cajun or a curry or any kind of powdered seasoning. Reason why I say that is it has a tendency, especially like granulated garlic, it will overflow. That's some science that I don't remember. Yeah, I had to take biology to get a culinary degree. I didn't have to take anything else, but it just makes everything bubble over, and your lids will pop, and you'll make a mess on your microwave, and you'll have to clean it up, or your roommate will have to clean it up, either or. So we're going to go ahead and pull. Let's see where I'm at. I'm going to go ahead and add my veg to both.
So, Chef, do you think you could use frozen vegetables for this recipe?
Yeah, I don't know how big a dorm refrigerator is, though.
Depends.
True. Actually, you can use whatever you want. I just threw these in, whatever vegetables make you happy, you know. The best part about cooking is all it is the application of heat and common sense. It's not hard. If it was hard, I wouldn't do it. So I wouldn't recommend like trying to do dried kidney beans. You could do a canned kidney bean. The kidney beans have to heat to a certain temperature just to soften. It needs it produces a gas inside, so it has to actually come to a boil for a long period of time. Lentils are quick. That's normally what I go with.
What grains would you recommend?
I'm always a quinoa. I used to be super anti-quinoa. Story for another time. Rice works. If you're using brown rice, you're going to almost double your time and almost double your water just because it takes forever. Nutritionally wise, it's been years since I've taken a nutrition class, but quinoa is your better choice than a white rice or even a brown rice for me.
You know why? Yeah, it has more protein.
Yeah. And if we look over that way.
Am I flipping the camera? Where am I going? Oh. You just need to change of scenery for a second, guys. Sorry. Okay.
Yes.
He's back.
It's done. Now, the beautiful like orange color that we had of the quinoa, not quinoa, but the lentils are now very yellow. Almost want to come back to the way how the quinoa is. You can use any tricolor quinoa. I just used this one because this was the one that was open. So then you throw your steamed vegetables on top of it. Make sure you get some on the counter.
And so what sauce leaves do you think? Could you use like soy sauce, hummus? What could you put on top of this to add some flavor?
Soy, hummus. honestly, whatever you're into. If you're like
Salsa.
into heat,
You can also
salsa would work. If you're into heat, you can use sriracha. You can use pretty much anything, whatever suits your flavor.
I like it. Awesome.
So you've got cilantro going right now, yeah?
That is just parsley,
Beautiful.
just to not make it
Colorful.
monochromatic.
Very simple, very easy. 15 minutes in your microwave, and you guys can have it quick. And this could be something where, I know we have some faculty and staff on here, so you could do this quite literally in the morning while you're getting ready for work. Have it in the same bowl and then bring it to work and just reheat it. If you are a student, you can do it in your dorm between classes or while you're sitting on Zoom classes. This is such a simple, easy, protein-packed, fiber-rich recipe. Thank you, Chef, for sharing this. We appreciate it.
Thanks.
And we will send the recipe around for how to cook these in your microwave tomorrow morning. All right, thank you, Chef. We are going to get started with questions. So if you have any questions currently, please feel free to put them in the chat, or if you would like to unmute yourself, you could do that as well. But we do have one in the chat, so we're going to answer a couple of those now. So let me just make these bigger so we can read them. There we go. So is white rice okay for complete protein, or should it be brown rice? I say when in doubt, choose brown rice, because typically most people need the boost of fiber. Brown rice also has more vitamins and minerals in it. So white rice is a good choice. It still has some carbohydrates, but it doesn't quite have as much of the amino acids, the fiber, the protein as brown rice. So always choose brown rice when you can. What's the reason for a B12 deficiency is a concern? Nancy, do you want to take that one?
So B12 deficiency can lead to anemia, and that's one of the things that we measure in the blood that correlates with complaints of fatigue and
So B12 deficiency, it's not found in many plant-based options, right? So the best source of B12 is nutritional yeast. And if you haven't had nutritional yeast before, it looks like fish food. It's flaky, but it has kind of a Parmesan cheese flavor. So you can use it in all sorts of things. I'll put it on salad, soup. You can toss it into pasta. 1 tablespoon has 100% of your daily needs of B12. So it's a fantastic source of B12. It's B12 is found in red meat, beef, chicken, fish. Not really found in many veggies besides mushrooms, and you have to eat quite a lot of mushrooms. So when in doubt, try to do nutritional yeast on some things.
And there are some fortified cereals that also have B12 added.
Correct. Yeah, that's another great source. Like Total is a great option. What's a good way to clean your vegetables for pesticides? Nancy, how do you clean your vegetables?
I usually mix up a solution with some vinegar, and I have a scrub brush, and I know you can purchase sprays in the grocery store, but really it's the friction of just kind of scrubbing skin.
Yeah, when in doubt, good old water typically does a great job. Is skinless/boneless chicken still high in fats? So typically when you're thinking about animal proteins, especially chicken, the breast is the leanest, and then the thigh is what contains the most fat and is also the most moist. Now, just because it has fat doesn't mean it's unhealthy. We still need fats in our diet to help us absorb vitamin A, vitamin D, vitamin E, and vitamin K. So fats are essential. I don't want to give the impression that you should be avoiding all fats and fearing fats. I think doing low-fat everything leads to another danger. So just try to incorporate fats when you can in a healthier way. So if you're choosing avocados, flax seeds, chia seeds are great plant-based sources of healthy fats. Okay. Some people are skeptical about using a microwave. Is there any merit to it? Well, we do know that microwaves give off rays. We absolutely know that, but research is showing that they're not as, if you're cooking this meal every once in a while, just like anything, right? If you're not buying organic all the time, and if you eat something unorganic, it's okay. Using microwaves in moderation is the same merit. it's okay. If you were cooking everything all the time, always standing in front of a microwave, then it would probably be a different discussion. But to be honest, I haven't done quite a lot of research on microwaves, but I do know that there is some research going both ways, showing that it is not an issue if you're not, standing in front of it all the time and using it all the time. But there is some research that, warning against using the microwave. But I think for this recipe, it will be fine.
I just step away from the microwave as it's running, and if I'm using it, and try to manage it that way.
Mm-hmm. All right. What's the best way to monitor ourselves for nutritional deficiencies? Nancy, this is all you.
Oh goodness. Yeah, lots of lab work. We do measure B12. We look at several parameters for iron deficiency, anemias in some blood work. We look at lots of labs.
Yeah, labs are typically the easiest. There are some things that we do look at, for example, iron. If you're lower in iron, if you pull down your eyelid, it's kind of more white, pale pink than a bright red pink. So there's one easy way to think about iron. If you are constantly struggling with energy, you probably don't have enough iron because that oxygen is not able to get to your muscles. So just thinking about, there are little things to look at when you're thinking about different nutrient deficiencies, but the be all end all, kind of the holy grail is lab work. Always lab work. Does Fortified mean they add vitamin supplements to the food? Correct. So Fortified means that they're adding things. So you'll see a lot of, a prime example would be orange juice, right? So orange juice doesn't typically contain calcium or vitamin D, but most orange juices are fortified with calcium and vitamin D, because that's something a lot of our population is deficient in. The food labels actually changed, I believe, a year and a half ago to include vitamin D in the percentage list. So now you can see how much vitamin D, and I believe they kicked vitamin A out for that one, just because most of us get enough vitamin A, but we do not get enough vitamin D. And is it safe to clean vegetables with water and vinegar? Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Yes. If you think about mayonnaise or ketchup, or really any salad dressing, they do typically contain vinegar. What I recommend is always diluting it, not doing 100% vinegar. Do maybe a cup of water with a couple tablespoons of vinegar in there. You don't need too much vinegar to help you clean. How to increase iron consumption in a plant-based diet? Oh, what a great question. So this one has a couple of layers to it. So the first layer is you want to be consistent with your iron intake. If there's one word I use too much, it's probably consistent. So the first thing is you want to include a lot of plant-based foods that have iron. And we're going to talk about this in our next session, so I don't want to dive too deep into it now. But the second thing is you want to limit some foods that blunt iron absorption. So for example, calcium and iron compete for the same absorption site. So they're competing for the same parking spot to get into your body. So if you have too much calcium with your iron, then they kind of compete and you lose out on some iron. So we will touch on this more in our next session. Ryan, do we need to worry about vitamin D supplementation / absorption if we are regularly outside in the sunlight for an hour or more? This depends. This depends on your skin tone and your ability to convert sunlight to vitamin D, but also what you're wearing. So if you're in long sleeve, sunscreen.
Yes. And we do obviously encourage sunscreen, which does reduce the amount of vitamin D that's being absorbed. But yeah, still going to push sunscreen no matter what.
Yeah. So we have about a minute left. Is there anyone else with any questions? All right. Well, we appreciate you both you all for joining us today. This is recorded and will be posted on the wellness website. If you have any questions, please don't hesitate to reach out to each of us, and hopefully we see you on the rest of the series coming up. The next one is on Monday.
Monday at noon. So it could be a lunchtime seminar for you. Yes.
All right. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.